What an excellent day for an exorcism.
God is not here today, priest.
Yes, he is.
Soundcheck.network. The new online magazine.
I promise I won't bite.
As a child, I learned to play the violin, so that was my beginning in music. I was sort of classically trained. I briefly went to a very famous music school, but I always yearned to play the drums, but that never happened. Learning the violin made the transition to playing bass guitar very easy because it's 4 strings. You play mono melodies. It's a very similar instrument. Initially, my music was more synthesizer based with bass guitar over it, probably what passes for minimal wave or something now, but I gradually transitioned into Gothic rock.
I grew up in a very musical house. So my mum and dad used to play piano, and my mum used to sing, and she'd come from a kind of family of musicians. So her mum was a concert pit, like orchestra pianist. She used to play for silent films. So yeah, there's a lot of music when I was growing up. So I started playing, I think probably the piano and synthesizer first. And we used to, there used to be a lot of bands at school and college, and we used to borrow a 4-track cassette recorder, and we'd lend it to each other during the college holidays. And each of us would make an album, record all the instruments, and then we'd kind of play our albums to each other when we all went back after the holidays. So that was kind of interesting because it began the recording process as well as actually writing songs, so it's kind of a good grounding. And then I was in a band in college called Stranger in Rose, and so I actually was the bass player in that band. And funnily enough, the guy who was the singer has actually at some point been in NOSFERATU. So I saw an advert for a singer, I think it was in Melody Maker or Sounds, goth band looking for a singer. And so the Stranger in Rose band that I was in, they had a couple of songs that didn't have any vocals on. You know, we had like a backing, and so I sang to that onto the 4-track, and then I sent that off as my kind of audition tape. And Vlad and Damien invited me to come up to London, and so we rehearsed in, I think, Vlad's mum's garage, and I auditioned there, and sort of that's how it started. And I started writing songs, and Vlad gave me a cassette of the current sort of songs that he'd written, and that's where I started, writing the lyrics and vocal melodies.
First other proper band before that was called The Dreaming, and actually 2/3 of it became what's now called NOSFERATU, and then members came and went. I say when Louis joined, we already had about 4 tracks where we'd written the music with the idea that when we found a new vocalist, we would crack on and release an EP. That became the Hellhound EP. And we ended up with 6 songs ready to record, and they formed part of his audition. We got everybody that applied to sing their own ideas to these new tracks and see who could do the best job. It gave us an idea if they could do the job, because unfortunately everybody thinks they're a singer, and we did audition some very colourful characters that had no chance, but Louis just fitted what we had in mind. And our plan from the start was, in the UK in the turn of the 90s, all the major acts had basically turned their backs on Gothic rock. They didn't like the image, they didn't like the music, and we wanted to create something that was taking Goth to 11. So we had a hard time because a lot of people thought we were stupid because we took it too far. You know, we perhaps did a few silly things along the way, but you know, our first 3 tours, we used a hearse to drive around the country. You know, we used to have elaborate backdrops, always lots of smoke. We wanted the image to be as strong as the music, and we stood out compared to a lot of the other goth bands because we were goth with a huge G, whereas a lot of the other bands were dark, but they kind of stood back. And we wanted to create like a brand, you know. But it was difficult because the UK press didn't like Gothic rock at all. All the major acts would have the fun made of them, and so they retreated. So we found ourselves fighting constantly against media and promoters, etc. We had to make our own breaks, and that's why we self-released the first EP. But we found a distributor, and we managed to get quite good sales just through our own promotion, and it built up. And eventually, after 3 EPs, we got a couple more contacts. We got Cleopatra in the US. They wanted to release our material, and we also had a German label who picked up Rise, and it's what sort of snowballed everything, you know. But we still always fought against the apathy of the UK press. The UK press is very different to other countries. They almost delight in finding new ways to be rude about bands. You know, it's like a sort of a raison d'etre for English journalists, that they want to sort of be as rude as they possibly can about everybody. And obviously Gothic rock was the biggest one of the lot that got this kind of attitude. So it was difficult, you know.
I like Jean-Michel Jarre and Tangerine Dream. When I was first playing synthesizers, I used to think they were really good. But after that, it was The Cure, and I went through a long time where I just thought bands that didn't sound like The Cure were shit. So for me, they've kind of remained like, I just think, the best band in the world probably.
For me, it's twofold. Stylistically speaking, because for me, the goth scene in the mid '80s, early '80s was style was as much of a thing as the music for most people on the scene, and so bands like the Specimen were very influential to me because they set the template of the Death Hawk and everything else, and the makeup. I was very much like on that line between new romantic and goth. The scene is very much intertwined, and the kind of looks that they both had were very similar. So I tended to drift towards bands that had a great look. So Sex Gang Children, Specimen, I don't know, Flesh for Lulu, bands like that, who had like a very powerful image, but the music was very sort of different. Alien Sex Fiend, for instance. They're very sort of dark and crazy. But they've all been influenced by different scenes themselves, because Alien Sex Fiend were influenced by Alice Cooper. So goth is always taken from every other scene. I mean, there's bits of everything in there, but the aesthetic is dark, and that's what I was drawn to. So all the bands that I liked a lot of glam bands as well, because I liked the image, Motley Crue and people like that, because I love the kind of, I'm very aesthetic, I like the whole package. I like the music to fit the aesthetic, and the aesthetic to fit the music, and to me it's all one. But that's my take. Everyone's different, and I've noticed over the years a lot of people tend to be more about the music, and it's kind of drifting. We're quite different. He's more, I would say, influenced by the classical literature element. The sort of less obvious. I'm a little bit more literal. Damien was kind of further the other way, so we had to pull two different ways. Damien wanted to have coffins on everything, and we wanted to kind of pull back a bit. So we kind of found this middle ground, but it's difficult because without trying too hard, you can end up being a little bit silly. You have to be careful with the imagery, and so over the years, I think we kind of toned it down a little bit. But we definitely have a different influence in that way. I think this is more sort of up here, the thought process. Mine's more visual. So we kind of cross over that way.
My skin is your skin. I'm so safe in your world. So safe in your world. I'm safe in your world. So safe in your world. There's nothing but silver, so sharp, pure to release me, peacefully cure.
Yeah, he was just Brian Warner at the time, but yeah, he wrote for a magazine called Propaganda, which was really a fanzine, but obviously being from New York, it was 30,000 copies an issue, so it was a big fanzine, and the guy that ran it was like a kind of trailblazer for that kind of thing, and I think he was a temporary editor for about 6 months, and he sent a lady to interview us. We had a gig in Wales in Swansea University, and she was sent to interview us for the magazine, but he was the editor-in-chief. This was before his Marilyn Manson days. It's what made him become a musician, because as a journalist he had this concept of what he thought would work, as a performance. And I think he's definitely influenced by Alice Cooper, the shock rock thing, I don't really consider Marilyn Manson goth as such. I think he's just very dark, and shock. It's a shock thing, more than goth.
Yeah, it's the same for me. I don't think he's got anything to do with goth. It's not what I think.
It's kind of dark shock rock, that's what I would describe as Marilyn Manson. You know, his early stuff crossed over a little bit, but he gradually morphed into more of a glam stroke industrial thing. You know. I'd say the beginnings of the band were around about the time that the scene was struggling, and we did our best to sort of give it a new lease of life. But obviously it was hard work because we were having to do it without any real sort of industry backing, you know. And the first EP was really just necessity. We'd recorded the songs, and we just felt in the end the only way we were going to get it released was to put it out ourselves. But we were fortunate that we pressed it up we took a chance and pressed it up, and then went round a few distributors, and they were so impressed that we'd got this professional package together. They offered us a distribution deal which got us into all the record shops in the UK, and gradually they expanded into Europe, and we managed to get distribution into other countries. But that's how it started, and really it was just practical, you know. We had to do it, and eventually we realised we could do it ourselves and actually keep complete control. And then we were fortunate, as I said earlier, that once we released 2 or 3 EPs, that other distributors in other countries took interest, and they didn't want to take any input on the creative side. They just literally wanted to release it in their territory. So we ended up with a deal in the US which covered Canada and Mexico and places like that. And then we ended up with a deal in Germany that covered Switzerland, Austria and all the other countries around it. So gradually we managed to start expanding further afield. But obviously it's difficult then because we didn't have the internet. We were relying on fanzines, word of mouth, adverts and magazines, things like that, you know. So it was quite tough to reach other countries. It's not like now. Now you can go on Facebook and everybody around the world can see it. But back then you had to rely on the fans spreading the word for you. So, you know, we'd get letters from somebody from Poland or somewhere, and, you know, it was like, how the hell did they find this? You know, we don't distribute in Poland, you know, but people used to search for the music. It's different now, people have it given to them, they don't have to look really hard. Well, we self-produced it. We didn't have a huge budget at that time, so we hired equipment and we self-recorded and produced the first 3 EPs. It was quite tough because we were learning as we went along, you know, but we gradually got better at it. And then eventually, as we got to Rise, we decided to up the ante and we hired a professional studio, a residential studio, and spent 2 weeks there doing it, and it was a completely different experience, you know. We worked with a guy that used to be an alien sex screen engineering and producing it, and we took our time, you know, and there's a lot of things we probably, knowing what we know now, we'd probably do slightly differently, and there were a few mastering and kind of, engineering things that probably, if we'd known ourselves a bit more about, we would have probably improved on. But it stood the test of time. People still like to play it. So, you know, and I think in the end, songs work however they're recorded. If people like those songs, they live on, you know. And it doesn't matter if the snare is not loud enough or the bass is the wrong frequency. If the song's good, people they let that go. They just enjoy the music. And that's what I think is happening at Rise, because there's a lot I think personally I would want to change about Rise that I wasn't happy about, but the technology wasn't there for us to be able to just go back quickly and change. We didn't have mixing desks with flying faders, so we couldn't go back to the studio and just adjust a couple of levels because we had to completely redo it. So it wasn't an option. I think we'll jump to the reunion. Okay, yes, you know, there's a complicated history with the band, and we kind of came full circle. We both found ourselves the other side, and we weren't too happy about the way the so-called official band was presenting itself. We felt they were ruining the legacy of the music, and I randomly contacted Lou and I said, what do you think about resurrecting the band, me and you, and you know, put it back to what it should be, quality, you know, a well-rehearsed type band, you know, playing the songs the way they were written. And there was a little bit of toing and froing. He wasn't too sure at first, and he said, okay, let's get in a rehearsal studio, see what happens. And after the first rehearsal, the next thing I know, he's posted on Facebook, we're back, you know, and it's like, okay, I thought we were going to see how things went, but it just accelerated, and we just thought, okay, let's do this properly. We got Robin of Red Sun Revival, Eden House, etc. Very reliable guitarist, very easy to get on with. We had an original drummer. It didn't work out in the end, and we were very fortunate last year. Simon was between projects, and we just kind of, okay, we'll ask. We knew Simon, do you fancy playing with us? And we were surprised when he said yes, because Simon's got a great track record, superb drummer, and it's been fantastic since then, because he's just really taken us to another level. So that's up to date, really. We've got a lot of shows next year. We're going to Mexico for a couple of dates. We've got shows in Porto, Prague, Whitby for the Goth Festival. So things are starting to really take shape now. And of course tonight in Athens.
So
So obviously we use backing for the strings and organs and some of the other instruments when we play live. And for a long time, various different versions of the band have just always used this same old backing that originally was from cassette, 4-track cassette. And it had been kind of remastered a few times, but you know, it was this old set of backing tracks. And so one of the first things that happened after Vlad and I's reunion was that Vlad rebuilt and re-recorded all of the backing for all of the old songs from scratch, which is something that only Vlad could possibly do, because obviously he wrote all those parts originally. So we now play with a completely, recreated backing that's, not just with better sounds, but like a better recording than the old one used to be. And that has kind of lifted the old songs, it's brought them back so they sound, the way that they should sound. And I think, there's a lot more subtlety in them than they used to be. And so, we've got a set. We've got some new songs in the set, and we've got a lot more that we're kind of working on, that we've been rehearsing and we're working on in the studio that's still being written.
Always a pleasure to come to Athens. As you know, myself on a personal level, I spend a lot of time here, so I've grown to love the city. So it's a pleasure to play Athens because there's a great audience here. We're very much looking forward to hitting new territories. Mexico next year will be the first time we've gone transatlantic, so we're very excited about that because by all accounts we're expecting a huge audience in Mexico, something we haven't experienced in Europe. So we really don't know what's going to happen, but it's extremely exciting. There's countries we're visiting next year we've never played before, so that's great. And we're hoping to sort of expand and hopefully hit other countries. There's possibilities in a few others that aren't finalised yet, but we're picking and choosing. There's a few countries we just don't seem to be able to get anywhere with at the moment, but I think gradually that will change. Yes, we do want to release new material, but it's been a tricky, long process, so I can't promise when that will be ready, but we've definitely got new songs. We're just not in a position to release them yet. But the old songs have been given a new lease of life, as Louis said. The whole point when we started this again was that we were going to do everything just that bit better. We didn't want to just turn up and knock out a few old songs. We wanted to make them better than they were, and that's what I hope we've done. So hopefully tonight and other nights to come, people will see that. And I hope they enjoy the show. We enjoy doing it, so let's hope they enjoy hearing it. Been a pleasure.
Soundcheck.network, the new online magazine.